Hi, my name's Peter Pakula, and one of the caps that I'm proud to wear is the IGFA Oceania Education Committee Chairman. As such, I'm able to get together some exemplary gentlemen in the world of sport and game fishing to discuss certain matters and try to break through the white noise of social media where there's an awful lot of misinformation. This video is about ethics, which is something that is very rarely discussed, but a very, very important part of sport and game fishing. Please enjoy the following video by some exemplary gentlemen.
Hi, my name is Jason Schroutweiser, and I'm the president of the International Game Fish Association, and I'm here to talk a little bit about ethics in fishing and what it means to me and the IGFA. From the perspective of the IGFA, I don't think that many people know that our first motto when we were founded in 1939 was for ethical sport and productive science. So ethics really go to the heart of the IGFA and really to the rules that we developed and maintain. And when I think of ethics and how it applies to our rules, it really means sportsmanship, giving the fish a sporting chance of escaping. And that's reflected in a number of things in the IGFA's rules. For example, you can't use a power-driven reel to reel in a fish. We limit line strength to 130 pound maximum. We don't allow certain practices, for example, such as using treble hooks with live bait because of the impact it could have on fish if they swallowed that and broke off. Things like that really speak to ethics. But for me personally, I think it transcends that as well. It's how we comport ourselves on the water, whether it be in an offshore situation or inshore situation, really giving respect not only to the fish and how we treat them. There is nothing wrong whatsoever in terms of harvesting a fish for a record or to eat, but if you're going to release a fish, treat it with respect, treat it ethically. Make sure it's in good shape and has a chance to spawn and survive, or perhaps be caught by another angler. And speaking of other anglers, when you're on the water, give respect to your fellow anglers. If there's a spot that you want to go to and you see that an angler is there or too many anglers are there, don't go there. Treat each other with respect, and I think that's part of being an ethical angler, and I think that's what we should all aspire to be. So that's my thoughts on ethics and angling. Thanks.
I've been asked to just list my idea of what ethics means, basically, as it relates to our sport of game fishing. I think ethics is really the moral principles that govern a person's behaviour or in the conduction of an activity. And that is a very, very wide definition. I'd like to firstly look at how that affects the fish. If, for example, you decide that you wish to take the fish, then it goes right back to before you even leave home. You should be prepared. You need to have ice available, some manner of dispatching that fish quickly. And of course, you only ever take what you can use. There's no point filling up your rescue with fish that are just going to sit in the freezer for 6 months and then be thrown away. So I think that's part of it. If you choose to tag and release, then you should certainly keep your handling of that fish to a minimum and take all the precautions. Wet your hands, wet towels, all that sort of stuff that we all know. If it's possible, and even better, leave the fish in the water. It's important, I think, to have an appropriate line class so you can minimise the fight time and then return the fish to the water in the best possible condition that you can, so it will then have a better possibility of surviving. And I think that's part of the ethics of fishing. The other part that I'd like to have a bit of a talk about are the rules that govern our sport, whether they be IGFA or GFAA rules. You need to know them, and if you don't know them, then look them up. I'm a little biased towards the GFAA, of course, and we have an app that is freely available. You can look it up on your phone, so it gives you all the information that you need there. Once again, you need to be prepared to disqualify your fish if you happen to accidentally break one of the rules, because after all, the people that have got current records have been through the process. They've caught the fish according to the rules, and if you, I won't use the word cheat, but perhaps bend the rules a little bit, it's not only unfair to yourself, but it's unfair to the people that went before you. You need to be a shining example, basically, of honesty and integrity. And you can never start too early. I think it's important that we school up our young fishermen to abide by the rules, and once again, encourage them to be prepared to disqualify their own fish if they need to. It's one of those things that if you learn it early, then it'll set the foundation for how you go about your fishing in the future. That's only two areas that I chose to talk about, how it affects the fish and the rules and integrity. And I think that really sums up, to my way of thinking, what ethics is all about in our sport.
So the whole thing about fishing for me started with, like most people, fishing for food, which is kind of ironic because I don't eat fish. But I was always fascinated about wanting to catch fish and the idea of catching big fish. And so it's been my life's pursuit really. But the as we our fishing tactics evolve and as our passion evolves, the whole contest is around the wit and strength of the angler versus the wit and strength of the fish. And the real challenge of the sport is around tilting the board in favor of the fish. So, to my way of thinking, that's where the IGFA fishing rules are really important because they they not only limit to what extent the board can be tilted in favor of the angler, but the welfare of the fish and the ability of the fish to give its best fight is always at the center of what we do. So that's the essence of what I think is fishing ethics, is a balanced, at worst, a balanced fight between man versus fish, and at best, a good fight with a worthy competition that favors the fish.
Okay, talking about ethics of fishing and game fishing in particular, I'm attracted to the Code of Practice of the Game Fishing Association of Australia, GFAA. Now, this was put together a long time ago, decades ago, and every year it's published in the GFAA Game Fishing Journal. The last one came out this year, 2025. And it's also on the website of the Game Fishing Association of Australia. I know IGFA has the underlying ethics of fishing, which is very sort of succinctly put, but the Code of Practice of GFAA was carefully thought out a long time ago, and it has quite a lot of detail in it. And I'd recommend anglers who are interested to go online and just look up Code of Practice, and just covering some of the points there. Code of Practice basically talks about respect in many ways. That's not the only thing, but basically the underlying tenet of the Code of Practice in GFAA is to fish to ethical standards espoused by GFAA. Now, they have lots of rules and regulations, and so an ethical standards is not necessarily defined in that term, but what it really means, and then the bullet points under that, basically, I'm not going to read them all out, but just to highlight a few. Show due care and responsibility for the habitat of game fish and other marine life. A lot of these are kind of no-brainers, but when you see it written down, you realise that there's a whole set of underlying ethical practices that anglers, many do practice these anyway, but I think a lot of people need reminding every now and then. So, for example, don't discard things overboard. Well, that's a no-brainer. Take care in anchoring over sensitive reef areas, only use biodegradable chemicals on board. Don't take too much packaging on board that might blow away. When you come back, make sure that everything's disposed of properly. Those sorts of things that to do with pollution. Then, of course, a big thing is minimising direct effects on wildlife, and that includes seabirds, marine mammals, reptiles, etc. I think most anglers don't want to harm those sorts of animals, obviously, but sometimes they come across them, and maybe a bird gets entangled in line. Well, care and respect in releasing those animals that might be you might come across. It doesn't happen all that often, but it does happen. Following regulations of government institutions, we know that there's a lot of rules, there's bag limits and size limits. Respecting and adhering to those is important. Anglers sometimes don't necessarily agree with some of those sorts of management regimes that come down from fisheries departments. But generally speaking, and as a scientist, the science underlying fisheries management, which includes imposition of size limits and bag limits and closed seasons for that matter, is very good these days. The science has evolved over the last few decades to give us a pretty good idea of the relative abundance of fish, and therefore if there's levers that need to be pulled to lessen the impact of fishing, and that includes commercial fishing, of course, but also recreational, then I'm not saying just believe everything that comes out of government department, holus bolus, but the underlying science of fisheries management in most cases is very good these days compared to maybe 20 years in the past. Tagging and releasing is a good example of ethical behaviour in fishing, and I've been around long enough to see the beginning of tag and release in game fishing in Australia in particular. It happened in America maybe 10 years before it happened in Australia. And there was resistance to tag and release in the early days. So it shows how attitudes have changed over time. The tagging program took quite a while to get off the ground in terms of momentum. People, in those days thought that game fishing was in fact weighing fish and records and winning competitions by weighing lots of fish, and having even categories in the tournaments for aggregate weight of marlin, for example. But the tagging side of things, once it did take off, and I'm talking about in the early 1980s, it took off exponentially, and now, of course, younger anglers today would not be aware that tagging didn't really happen for until the 1970s, 1980s. It's become part of game fishing, but that there still needs to be respect of the fish that you're tagging and releasing, of course, and there's lots of guidelines of handling fish for releasing, maximising survival after release. Post-release survival is the most important thing. The other thing, of course, is respecting the fish itself. Not, if you're going to take it for a record claim or for weighing in a tournament or for eating, respecting the fish is really important in terms of dispatching it humanely, which means kind of ethically, and that usually means in terms of a tuna on board or a dolphin fish, giving it a good rap on the head with a club of some sort, and you always have one of those handy, stunning the fish, and then looking after the fish after it's been caught. Now there is a little bit of a dilemma sometimes, I think, in tournaments and even records of bringing in the whole fish without bleeding it and without gutting it, and which means that generally the fish won't be as good for consumption afterwards. And in Australia we have a fantastic program that's been going for quite a number of years now, called Tuna Champions, mostly covering the southern states and mostly focusing on southern bluefin tuna, which is now being caught in really great numbers, from once being very rare in the fishery because it was heavily overfished by commercial fishing in the 60s and 70s. the resurgence of southern bluefin meant that a lot of people started to catch these nice big tuna, but didn't really look after them. And so when this is if they were taking them home for the table, they didn't really have a good reputation for eating quality until the tuna champion team demonstrated, excuse me, the best methods for dispatching the fish to start with, and then immediately bleeding the fish by cutting it in certain positions just under the pectoral fin and near the tail, getting rid of most of the blood, and also taking the internal organs out and packing the body cavity with ice. This is the best way to get the core temperature down. In that case, and this is what's done in commercial fishing, that fish is in the best condition for eating, and therefore you're respecting the fish, and you're preparing for the table, and you know, enjoying the full benefits of fishing for the table. I think in tournaments that doesn't really happen very much, because the rules are quite often that you can't bring in a mutilated fish, although you could argue that it was mutilated after capture. And I know that in some tournaments in Queensland, the state of Queensland, for example, other game fish can be weighed that are bled and gutted, that have been for eating later on. And I'm not sure if this is 100% correct, but I think they add 10% on for the weight of fish that are done like that. So I think all of these things are, you know, kind of, like I say, you know, logical ways of respecting the animal in its environment. Lastly, I'd say that the code of practice of the Game Fishing Association does very clearly state that anglers will or should participate in research programs, support research, and in fact GFAA supports research over the last several decades by actively helping by taking researchers out on boats and making accessible the fish at tournaments, which has been fantastic, but also financially too, making small grants to researchers, in particular postgraduate students at universities, and that's a tremendous help to having really good research done on the biology of the fish. So understanding the biology of the fish is crucial to management, and it behoves anglers to look into the research and find out what has been going on, so that they also understand the biology of the animals, the growth rates, their reproduction, and sporting seasons, spawning grounds, and that sort of thing. That probably covers a lot of the areas, but like I said, the code of practice, look it up on the GFAA website, Game Fishing Association of Australia, and have a look at it, read it, and I think you'll take some of those on board when next time you go fishing, and fish ethically. Thanks.
I've been fishing for my whole life, since I was 5 anyway, and I'm in my mid-70s now. I wasn't exposed to IGFA rules until in the mid-20s, when I started marlin fishing for the first time. And I fished with a guy who was the president of our local fishing club called Garth Marsland, who was an absolute stickler for the rules. And so that's how I was brought into game fishing, and that's how I still operate today. I've learned from a master as far as I'm concerned. I don't fish IGFA rules all the time, but I always do when I'm fishing for marlin or two. But as far as I'm concerned, the rules are designed to level the playing field, so that the fish has got a reasonable chance of escaping, and everyone who's trying to catch a fish is also on a level playing field. They're all operating under the same guidelines, if you like. For me, it's all about personal integrity, the rules. And for example, you could say, if I was acting with integrity, I'd act the same way all the time, whether someone was watching me or not. So, for my own self-respect, I know what the rules are, and I'm going to stick to them. You respect the fish. If you're going to take one, you dispatch it humanely. You make sure it arrives on shore in really good condition, so it's best possible condition to be eaten. I don't kill anything that I'm not going to eat, and I don't take anything more than what I need on any one occasion. So I don't go out and catch all I can. I go out and catch what I want, what I need, what I think that I need. And I think by doing that, you're also respecting all the other anglers that have gone before you. I'm quite sort of keen on the whole idea of the history of fishing and following on from what's gone before. You know, when I talk about integrity, it's like if you say you've tagged and released a fish, for example, only you and the people on your boat know if you actually did that. If you say you caught it on a certain line class, only you and the people on the boat know that's true. There's a lot of trust involved in this game, and only you know if you've infringed any rules while you caught the fish. It's really character building if you have to disqualify a fish because something went wrong during the playing of it. I've done it. I know a lot of guys that have done it, and I know guys that should have done it and haven't done it. But that's up to their personal integrity as far as I'm concerned. So from here on in, when I retired, I thought I'd have lots of time to go fishing. And funnily enough, it hasn't worked out all that well, but this year I'm definitely going to go fishing. And from here on out, however much time I've got left, my ambition is to teach young anglers to fish right and to fish with integrity. That's me, mate.
Okay, what I'd like to talk about is the ethics of fishing and how we compare our fish captures to somebody else, whether it be another individual or another boat. When we fish a tournament, we're fishing by the rules, whether they are IGFA or GFAA. It doesn't matter. It's a level playing field for everybody in the tournament. We abide by the rules, so our capture is compared equally to the rest of the people in the tournament. Now, when we're not fishing a tournament, whether we're individuals fishing on a beach or on a boat, we pretty well will still stick to the rules. Occasionally, a tired angler might rest their rod on the gunnel of the boat, but most times individuals will fish by the rules. Now, in a charter boat situation or a private boat, when there's a group of people, there can be tendencies to maybe flaunt the rules a little bit to make the capture a bit easier. Now, do we compare that capture to somebody that has abided by the rules? Is that equal? We should look at the intention of what we're going to do. So if we intend to gaff a fish and we don't gaff the fish, then should we count that fish as captured? Or if the crew, for example, hand the rod to the angler, or somebody pinches the line to bring it up or grab the double line instead of the leader, should we allow that fish to be counted as a caught fish? And this is where the ethics of game fishing come in. And I certainly believe that the intention should be to abide by the rules, and therefore your capture is equal to the next person. But if you want to flaunt the rules, I don't think it's right that you can fairly count that fish as a caught fish. And this is where we see on social media quite a lot nowadays with people posting videos and it may not be intentional, some of the things that happen, like somebody reaches up and grabs the rod to pull it down so they can get an easier reach of the leader. They might assist the angler by supporting the rod as well. If the angler's tired or they fear there may be some predation on the target species, is it ethical and right to circumvent the rules? So this is up to the individuals, obviously, up to the team on the boat. But it's one of those things that we really do need to look at in ourselves and have pride in the fish we've caught. So if we do catch the fish by the rules, then we should be very and justifiably proud of our achievements.
Hi guys, I'm Tim Simpson and I'm on the Rules Committee for the International Game Fish Association. Something I've been passionate about for many years, and something that I find sadly not discussed in general game fishing discussion, is the importance of fishing ethics. And so I'd like to just bring a couple of points to your attention. And to start with, I'd like to point out that fishing for game fish is not necessarily game fishing. What makes game fishing different, and particularly game fishing conducted under the angling rules and the principles of the International Game Fish Association, is the fact that the IGFA has angling rules. And that makes it an official sport rather than just a recreation where you're out there catching game fish, but just catching them for fun without any rules or regulations to follow. So if we want to be competitive, and this can be competitive against ourselves, just comparing this capture against another capture another day, and particularly when we want to compete in tournaments or in club competitions against other anglers, we really do need to have a set of angling rules that we all abide by to keep it on a level playing field, so that we all know that our catches compare equally to the catches of others. And this also applies, of course, to world records and any records, because if you're not fishing equally, then how can you compare catches? So we need the rules, and that makes our sport different. And when we have rules, we need to have ethics. And if I can just read a quote of what ethics actually means, it's the moral principles and values that govern behaviour within our community, ensuring fair and honest competition by promoting principles like respect, integrity, fairness, and responsibility. And I believe that as game fishing anglers, fishing to IGFA principles, we really do need to have ethics, and we need to abide by them personally. Now, there are several key benefits of that. We have fair play, so we're competing with integrity, adhering to rules, and ensuring all participants have an equal opportunity. And there are many others, but I'll go into that at another time. But having ethics ensures that the pursuit of victory does not come at the cost of fair and honest competition. Ethical conduct by all participants builds confidence in the integrity of our sport, the sport's administrative body, the events we fish for, and the records we strive for. So it really is fundamental to making game fishing a sport where we can compare our results against each other, against their own results on other days, and we make a competition out of it. And it's a great, fun, excellent way to enjoy the outdoors, but as an organised sport. And I hope also that you have the moral integrity to follow those principles even when no one is watching. And that's also key to us all trusting each other. And game fishing as a sport is very much a question of trust. And we can all enjoy it together, we can all compete together, and we can all have great faith in the records and the tournaments that we achieve. Good luck to you.